Hi, guys. I'm talking to William Seremak today. William has had I want to call it a epic drama in his life dealing with our family court system, which of course many in my audience are more than familiar with. Um, and William is on day 68 of a hunger strike, protesting what's happened to him legally. That's quite a commitment, William. How are you doing in that regard?
Well, I have an underlying neurological disease and lupus, so it's very hard to determine how bad I'm feeling, whether that's from the disease or from the hunger strike. Um, I'm doing well today because I'm happy to be here and get my story out. I've not been doing well in general the last couple weeks, especially, but I don't know if that's due to the disease or the hunger strike.
Okay, well, I guess time will help solve this. And just to be clear, we're not going to dig into the whole story right now, but I'd like to know, what is it that you want to see happen? What would cause you to
There's
return to food?
There's
And
three things I'm asking for, and I'd like to get at least movement on a couple. The first is I'm trying to get the presiding judge to speak with me. The second is there is part of the system where they produce a report for the court, and they've been making reports that are inaccurate and not looking at any of the actual evidence I submit to the court. I'd like to speak to the supervisor there who hasn't been willing to speak with me. And the final and last thing is I've been trying to get before the committee to eliminate bias and promote equal justice. It's the Civil Rights Committee for Riverside County. Every county in California has one. I've been trying to get before them on and off for 6.5 years and have made a huge effort. Well, no, about 4 years. So I don't want to misspeak. About 4 years. And the last year I've made extraordinary effort to get a reply, and they've never even replied to my complaints.
as I'm sure you're discovering through all your effort, progress in this area, addressing the corruption, the bias in our family courts, the outrageous rollback of civil rights that happens during these processes is very much like pulling teeth, almost impossible. A lot of people will tell you that the judges won't look at evidence and they know it's there. They just don't care. This is just about getting another person through the system, collecting their money, and moving on to the next victim. Are you prepared to die for this?
I don't want to die, but I realize that is a possibility. I do not think the way the system is, as bad as it is, me just sitting out in front of the court is going to do it. I think what's going to have to happen is I'm going to have to get a lot of attention to it. Probably going to at least have to end up in the hospital. And I'm actually surprised I'm not there yet, because I'm surprised I'm doing as well as I am. I didn't think I'd make it this long. Um, but I think I have to allow for that possibility. The problem I have is that for I've become so overwhelmed by this that for the last year, I've really not got out of bed except to maybe go to the grocery store and stuff like that. Um, I've come to realize that the path I am on with the depression and everything that's happening, and just all the flashbacks from the story I'll tell you, um, I'm going to end up killing myself. So this is not really an attempt to kill myself. This is kind of an attempt to save myself from killing myself. If I can get some movement, some hope of being in my daughter's life, can rescue her, then I'll have hope. But I can see that over time, the direction I'm on, because I'm very self-aware of what's going on with myself, this is actually an attempt to make that not happen. But I realize that it could happen. I do.
Okay. Well, this is, and again, to my audience, a guy ends up in family court. He really gets screwed over. Children are alienated. They're torn away from fathers on basically bullshit accusations that really don't need any proof or corroboration in court. And you end up with a desperate father in the end, trying anything to maintain some sort of contact with his child and to be a presence in their lives, and the system won't let it happen. But there is a big story, not just in the legal aspect of us, but in your personal story. And I want to start this first part of the talk talking about that. Tell me about a little bit about your upbringing, what that was like. I know that you've mentioned in your story, which I read, that there was abuse in your home. I didn't hear how that is detailed. Can you give us some insight into the beginning of your life, your family, and sort of the start of the road that lands us here talking?
Okay. Well, I realize the generation I grew up in, I'm Gen X, that a lot of parents did physically discipline their kids. And it's kind of a normal for my generation. But mine, I was disciplined very excessively, to the point I used to go out and try to just run away to the edge of the city. I used to hide in a closet a lot of times just to hide from my parents. Um,
So it was both of them?
it was both of them, although it was, to be fair, it was initiated by my mother, and I think my mother did more of the abuse than my father.
Okay. And so what was the environment like? I mean, you were, was it
Well,
all
I grew up,
physical abuse? Was there psychological abuse, that sort of thing going on?
yes, but I found a way to deal with it. It took me a long time. I don't know if people realize just how much abuse really affects someone, especially mine started extremely young. I don't know how old it was, but it is as far back as I can remember. Um, I'm sorry, I do have some issues with memory. What was the question again?
Well, I just really wanted to get a feel for, let's we don't need the gory details of
Right.
how you were abused, but I wanted just to get a sense of the type of home that you came from and the
It was,
mentality about marriage,
it,
relationships, that sort of thing that sprung from that.
uh, basically mostly neglect and a lot of abuse early on. Um, I've never had an actual real conversation with my father my entire life. Um, with all the abuse starting so young, I never wanted to be near my parents, and I didn't want them to be near me. And so most of my effort was just try to stay out of the way.
Said that most of the physical stuff came from your mother. Did your father ever intervene?
Well, in the beginning, it came from my mother.
Okay.
Later on, it was primarily my father. But in the beginning, it was primarily my mother.
Was this a situation where he was acting as the proxy uh, for her
Yes, I
violence?
remember a distinct time when my mother said that if he, my dad, and this was kind of before my dad really started getting involved, where my mother told my dad that if he doesn't spank me or take care of this, that he was not a man. And I
Well,
remember one point my father being on his knees crying. And I remember the first time he really laid into me, he was crying also because he was kind of being forced to do it by my mother. But then later on, for him, it became just normal.
he got trained pretty well, it seems.
Yeah.
Okay. So, at what point did you leave home, and how did you get a job?
I was 16 or 17. I had started working because I wanted to go to college. I knew I couldn't count on my parents. I wanted to get out of the home, so I started working. Um, at 16, I was working full time. I would often go to school and write my own notes because I got up late because I worked till like 2 in the morning. At 17, I worked in a factory for a while, and eventually I went to college.
Okay. And when did you meet your ex-wife?
I met her around 2012 or 2013. It's a little fuzzy.
Okay. And how did that relationship begin?
Well, I was already disabled at that point. Um, but I met her on eHarmony through a date on eHarmony.
Okay. And how did the bond start forming? I mean,
This was my thought process. I used to own a real estate company, and my entire life I wanted to make sure I was nothing like my parents. So my plan was to build up a big nest egg and actually retire while I had children. But then what happened was the real estate market crashed, my company crashed, then I got the disease. So I was kind of in a place where I really want kids, I really want a family, and I tried to turn down my expectations of the type of woman I would find because I didn't think many women would accept me the way I was. And frankly, since
being
my
ill and
whole,
disabled, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
especially since my whole personhood was the ability to earn money. So when I no longer had that, I felt of no value. Um, so I was very appreciative of this woman who was giving me a chance. And that's kind of how it started.
Okay. So she knew that you were financially struggling when you got
Oh,
together?
definitely she knew that, yes.
Okay. And so in retrospect, I mean, it is very unusual for a woman to pair bond with a man when she's more of a primary earner. Or
Yeah,
so,
my wife, my ex at the time made about 120 grand a year. And I was at about 18,000 a year because I was on disability. So yeah, there was a big disparity. The reason I believe she went with me is I'm intelligent man. I'm very well mannered. I can speak, and this is likely to produce a child with many of the same traits. Who's going to be agreeable? Who's going to be all these things that you would want in a child? So I think that's kind of how she looked at it. Also, before my health got super bad, I was still a decent looking guy. so that, and I'm 6'2", and they like height. So that I'm sure helped too.
okay. Is it possible she also saw somebody she could crush if need be?
Oh yeah, that I think, yes. I think that was part of it, although I did not realize that when I initially met her. Yeah.
And when you met her, if you can sort of take yourself back to that time for me, what was your views of what a relationship meant? What were you supposed to do to be a good husband, and what was she supposed to do to be a good wife? What were your ideas of that?
Well, my thought would be that the primary reason for anyone to be together is for kids. I don't really think people should get married if they're not having kids. I don't think they need to. But in a marriage, I think the primary focus should always be in having a calm, stable, loving family where all your efforts go towards making sure the kids learn a lot, are well behaved, learn how to not make mistakes. Um, I'm very much a very stereotypical father type personality. Um,
Okay. Were you a romantic?
I try to be romantic. I remember on the first date, I brought her a small bouquet of flowers. Um, I always listened very well. I've always tried when there was any kind of disagreement, I was always tried to really explain my opinion and views on things. I tried to get her to understand the importance of family. When she started not being kind to me, I tried to explain that it's going to harm the relationship long term. Um, I've been away for so long and not thought about that for a long time, just because everything I've been through.
Were there any concerns at the time you guys decided to get married about your status as a provider? Um, did she express concerns?
She had, I had told her, I've been very forthright from the very beginning. The very first time I met her, I said, I do not think I will ever be able to work again. I hope so, because I used to work, I went 7 years straight without a day off because I own my own company. So I said, I really, really want to work and I would be hopeful to, but I told her I think it's very, very unlikely, just as my disease is really bad.
And what was her reaction to that?
She seemed to accept it until she was pregnant. At the beginning of the relationship, and then as the pregnancy progressed, she did not accept it anymore. In fact, it got after she became pregnant, she told me many, many times, I hate you and resent you for being disabled. And that's exactly word for word what she would tell me.
Oh, great. Okay. Um, how long into the marriage before she got pregnant?
She was pregnant before we were married.
Okay.
We got married a few months, I think, after she got pregnant.
Okay. Um, and so things went downhill rather quickly if she started with the shaming and verbal abuse.
Right. She was mildly abusive before she became pregnant. Certainly the warning signs were there and I ignored it.
Why do
Once
you
she
think
became,
you ignored it?
I ignored it because I wanted a family so badly. I ignored it also because I've always been a leader in my business. So I thought that if I just explained how the best way to live our lives was and explained how what she was doing and saying was harming our relationship and would harm our daughter, I thought that I could talk her, because she's an intelligent woman. I thought I could talk to her and make it work.
Okay. Um, famous last words. I think that a lot of us have had to face at some point or another in our lives. I know I have that same exact thing. Um, so what happens after the baby's born?
Oh, after the baby's born, it got really bad really fast.
Okay.
In fact, she didn't, when she had the baby, she didn't come, after she had the baby, she didn't come home. She went to her parents. Now, she said this was because the home was under construction. There was remodeling being done and it was too dirty. That really, I mean, there was some, but it was all, I forget what, plasticed in. So there really wasn't. I think that was more because at that point she was really ready to punish me for not working. It was more like, I'm taking the baby away. I want you to work. But she didn't understand that my disease was so bad and that just put more stress and just made my disease worse or my condition worse.
So did she ever offer a rationale for how she goes from saying, I don't care, I love you, the income's okay, let's get married, start a family, all this, and then all of a sudden she doesn't want to be with a disabled man and she starts punishing him for existing. Did she ever express any insight into the what thought process was in her mind?
No, my ex is not communicative. She never really has been. Um, but yeah, she doesn't really communicate anything. In fact, it's either was her telling me what a loser I was or not speaking to me at all. So she can do silent treatment really well. Um, yeah.
And so she has the baby in the hospital and goes to her parents' house and essentially starts the alienation process from the time the baby's born. Do you think
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
fair assessment?
That's very fair. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go from there to from bad to worse, I suppose. What happens? What's the next turning point for the relationship after the baby's
Well,
born?
she wouldn't allow me to go to like Christmas, family events, birthdays. Uh, Basically, I was not allowed to interact with her family anymore.
And her family supported that?
Yeah, I think primarily because her mother was, I could kind of tell, although she never said. Um, yeah, they went along with it. Their whole family went along with it. Now, her family isn't large, it's just her parents and her aunt. But yeah, they all went along with it.
Were they making insinuations about you? Were they joining in sort of this campaign of demoralizing you?
No, they never did. They
Okay.
never did. Now, over those 2 years before she made her allegations against me, I did write letters and emails to her parents and aunt and sent her parents 42 text messages telling them I was being abused and asking them to intervene to stop it. I never got any reply of any kind. Except the aunt did stop by once to check into on me and to see how I was doing and see if I was okay. But no interaction other than that.
Okay. And what was life like for you during that time?
Well,
How were you
during that
living?
time, I I was abused so badly that I was bedridden for about 2 years. In the middle of that, I don't remember exactly when because I was going through a lot, but somewhere in that 2 year period, I did end up having a pulmonary embolism, probably a combination from the abuse and being sedentary and my disease. Um, so I got a pulmonary embolism, and that, of course, nearly killed me. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with pulmonary embolisms, but you can just drop dead.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So how were you doing psychologically during this time?
Well, horribly, horribly. I did not know it got to the point where I had really almost no idea what was going on around me. I would walk into different rooms and not know why I was there. I'd look at my wife and I would not know her name. Um, it was little overwhelming because the verbal abuse was literally every day from the morning to night. Whenever she did communicate with me, and it was every day. So it took such a toll. The infusions and other medication I get, they were not effective under that extreme amount of stress. They won't work when you have a neurological disease. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
And so let's go to what happens next. At some point, this thing turns toward divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about how that transpired.
Well, at one point, um, we did. She started saying divorce, and I kind of tried to explain to her, this is not the road we want to go down on. Once you say divorce, it just becomes progressively worse. Can we please not do that? Of course, she continued. Finally, I realized this is going to have to be divorce. So we sat down, we wrote a post-nuptial agreement, said, when I'd see the kids, which is, I think, why she made the allegations later, because she didn't want me to see my daughter. Um, 6 months into being married, she took my life savings and stole it. So it said she was going to give that money back. That was part of the post-nuptial agreement. So it was basically that, and I would be able to see my daughter whenever she went to work during the day, and she would get my daughter otherwise.
I got to stop here and ask a question. It's kind of a tough one, but I think it's important. How did
Okay.
she end up with access to your life savings?
Okay. I have a I had been through a lot with my bankruptcy. So I didn't no longer I was kind of, and this might not may be hard for people to understand, but when you go through the bankruptcy, I did not want to put my money in the bank. I kept all my money at home. I had $53,000 and I kept it at home.
Okay. And she physically just took it.
Yes. I didn't even realize, I don't even know exactly when she took it because I never checked up on it. I told her where it was because I knew my health was bad and I could possibly, especially with all the abuse, pass away. So she didn't know where it was. And then I just went there one day to check in on it and it was gone.
Okay. All right. So at some point, the lawyers get involved. Tell us about that. How did that go?
What do you mean by the lawyers got
Well,
involved?
at some point, a divorce was filed.
Right. The divorce, though, wasn't filed till years later.
Okay.
The way there's years, I'm already been through jail before the divorce came up. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm
So
not sure.
let's go to that. Let's go to that. When was the first accusation against you made that began to
Okay.
generate legal jeopardy for you?
Right. So, for years I was going to her parents and aunt and asking for help, and that wasn't working. Now, I never would have done what I'm about to tell you, but I did say I would do it. I told her that if she did not stop the abuse, I was going to tell her work. Now, she was always desperately afraid of anyone knowing about the abuse. So that really hit her hard, harder than I thought it did. So what she did is she went and got a restraining order based on a threat I had made a year before in order to stop the abuse. Got the restraining order, and she was home, and our child was home when someone came to the door to serve it to me. And I turned to her and asked her, "What is this? Why did you do this?" And she tells me, because you were going to tell me to work, or you're going to tell my work, you forced me to lie. So that was her explanation of why she lied in the restraining order.
Okay.
I then went to court. In court, I gave the judge 2 written apologies where she apologized for abusing me and promised to stop. The reason I had those is because she had apologized hundreds of times telling me she was going to stop the abuse. And at certain points, I said, "I don't believe you anymore. If you really mean it, put it in writing." Now, to be fair to her, when she did put it in writing, it did stop for a couple months, the abuse, but then it just started up again. I also gave the family court judge the 2 years of written letters and emails where I'm asking for help. I put her parents and aunt on the stand. The parents and aunt said that there were no signs of abuse and that their daughter and niece had never told them I was abused. The judge then awarded full custody, granted the restraining order, awarded full custody with no visitation to my wife. And at that point, my story continues, which you know a little bit about, but I don't know what questions you want to ask about it.
Well, I want to begin to paint the picture of we're going to go from the marriage, which I think we at least have some measure of understanding of at this point, including the fact that abusers' greatest fear is being exposed. It's always of the world finding out about, and this is particularly true with borderline personalities or personality disordered females. Their fear of exposure is very great. And it's unfortunately one of the better motivators for them. But now we're going to move from your marriage itself into the court proceedings and what's been happening legally with you that led to a hunger strike. Um, Suffice it to say that a judge looking at evidence and deciding against the father is not a remarkable thing. It happens every day in family courts across the country. It's part of the routine for family courts. So what I want to know now is how we get to you on a hunger strike. What is your
Okay,
motive? Yeah.
that's a
And
6.5 year process
right.
of
And
being.
we're gonna talk about that. What I want to do today is kind of lay the foundation for it. And then we're going to come back and get into a lot more of the details next week.
Okay,
Uh, So let's start laying the foundation for us of how William Seremak ended up 68 days into a hunger strike,
okay,
asking for things that are rarely, if ever, happen.
right. Okay, so what happened was the judge made that ruling, and I was so upset because I had been through so much that I made a sign that said the judge's name, Yellow Rain, gave my daughter to my abuser. Sat in front of the courthouse for about 10 weeks. Okay. I had already, within the first day, I think it may have been the first day, I called my wife because she had stolen all my money. She'd rung up about 20 grand on my credit cards for the home renovation, and I had no money. So I called her up. I said, I need money to have a place to stay. That was a misdemeanor violation of the restraining order. So I had already been appointed a public defender for the misdemeanor. After 10 weeks of protesting the judge, my case is turned over to the DA. I believe the judge said I is the one who was responsible for turning it over to the DA. Now, the important part here is before I protested her, they didn't think I was this tremendous threat to my wife. It was only after protesting they turned it over to the DA and told the DA I was protesting the judge. I get a call the day before I'm supposed to go in for the misdemeanor, and my attorney tells me the DA is furious that you protested a judge. As a result, you're going to be charged, and I don't know what you're going to be charged with, but you are going to jail. Now, at the time, I took what she said to mean when she said DA, that it was the DA for the county of Riverside, Mike Hestrin. But that name was never said. So I honestly don't know if it was him who was furious or the particular DA on my case. Um,
Well, let me interject just for a moment that, what we see in most of these cases that the judge, the DA, the public defenders, they're all part of one group, sort of a cabal. If you attack a judge, the whole group will turn on you, including your own attorney. I've seen it happen before. Does that sound familiar?
um, I don't know. They were all turned on me. I don't know because the first year I was in jail, I never even spoke to my public defenders. I was assigned multiple public defenders. They kept changing it. I never spoke to any of them for the full year. So I don't know what their position was, but I guess you could say they were against me because they wouldn't even speak to me.
So you were in jail for a year without access to an attorney?
Yeah, they would appoint an attorney, but the attorney would never talk to me. Yeah. In fact, I went into my preliminary hearing with an attorney, a defense attorney named Tavi, Tavie, I think, Nguyen, Nguyen. I'm pretty sure that's how you spell it. And I had never spoken to her before the preliminary hearing. I learned, I don't remember at what point I was being charged with terrorist threats and domestic violence, both of which could have been overcome at that preliminary hearing because there was absolutely no evidence of domestic violence at all. I would have told my attorney about the 2 written apologies that my wife abused me, about the years of letters, and about the parents and aunt already testifying that there was no signs of abuse and my wife never said she was abused. I would have said all that to my attorney and probably for sure got the DV dismissed. And then additionally, there's 5 elements to a terrorist threats charge, none of which were present. And I would have explained that to my attorney. I think I could have got both eliminated immediately, but not being able to talk to my attorney beforehand, that didn't happen. Oh, also, one thing I should mention, when I did go to court, they set my bond at $555,000. There are murderers who don't get given that kind of bond. To give you some kind of perspective on the Riverside justice system, at that very same time, there were 2 separate sheriff's deputies who were charged with, I forget what you call it, statutory rape. And I don't remember if it was 20 or 40,000. Just to be safe, they were only each given $40,000 bond. And this is for child rape. And here you're putting a domestic violence victim in jail who's disabled and has no way of getting out on a $500,000 murderer type bond. And I know that that level of bond was done solely because I protested a judge.
That's an angry judge.
Yeah.
That kind of bond is an angry judge for sure. And I think we should also point out, I read through the NCFM website and the documents of yours that were presented there. It was actually your wife who was physically abusive. She wasn't just verbally abusive. She was.
Yeah. Now I don't
physically.
want to ever over exaggerate anything. I think now it's really hazy because I was in such a state I didn't know a lot what was going on. I think it was maybe 12 real incidents of real physical violence. So a couple of them were pretty severe, but I don't think it was more than a dozen about. But the constant also verbal abuse, that took a toll.
Okay. But there was an incident, I believe you recounted, where you're on the floor playing with your daughter and your ex
That's the
proceeds
incident.
to kick you while you're on the floor.
Yeah, it was right in the morning, and I went in to play with my baby, and I'm laying on my floor with my baby, and I hadn't even spoken to her yet that day, and then she just comes in with her shoes on and just starts kicking the hell out of me. And it was sudden, and I was in shock. I ran out of the room. I was really angry for about 2 seconds, and I rammed into the door and put a hole in a hollow door with my shoulder. Immediately, when I realized I put a hole in the door, realized this is too much, and walked away. Then she went to work. Then I told her in a text message, if this abuse doesn't stop, I'm going to kill you. I was so furious. I kept reliving the incident with PTSD over and over in my mind. And I said, if you continue this, I'm going to kill you. Don't come home. Stay 100 yards away from me. I don't want you near me anymore. Basically, a long, multi-hour text rant because it affected me so badly.
Was that used as evidence against you?
Yeah, the text were, but what's funny is when she submitted the text, she took out the conditional part where I'm explaining why I'm so mad and what has to stop. Her attorney mistakenly gave me all the copies, and later on I did get to the court showing him it was conditional, but initially they hid that from the court.
Okay.
And that's important in California because in California, if a threat is conditional, that's not considered, quote, terrorist threats.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got to ask.
And she did continuing abusing me because that was about the middle of the 2-year period. She did continue abusing me for the whole next year. So she wasn't afraid that would actually do anything.
Well, yeah, obviously. I got to ask, at any point during all this insanity, did it ever occur to you to just walk?
It did. In fact, I take infusions 3 times a week of immunoglobulin for my disease. During that entire 2 years, I was taking about half, well, 70% of the dosage I should have been saving, trying to save up that immunoglobulin because I was on her insurance. And for me to get out and survive, I can't really survive without that drug. It's not really a drug. It's kind of it comes from blood. It's derived from blood. Anyway, it's a medication. Without that, I can't function. Without medication, I'm bedridden. I can't really walk because the pain's so bad without that immunoglobulin. So I started storing that up. I got the prenup or the postnup. So I was kind of trying to get out, but at the same time, I also knew already, even before all this, that the family courts weren't great for men. And I wanted to be in my daughter's life so desperately. That was a factor keeping me, a major factor, probably the primary factor in keeping me with her, is just the desire to be with my daughter all the time.
Are you officially divorced now?
I have no idea. I've applied for divorce 3 times, but when I submit for divorce, they don't even acknowledge it. They don't even read the paperwork. Now, she did file divorce once without notifying me. And then she calls me one day, and she's not supposed to call me, but she calls me one day and tells me, we're divorced, you're no longer on my insurance. At which time I filed with the court saying I was never notified of the divorce. Because in a divorce procedure in California, she has to notify you. And then if you don't show up, the court has to notify you. I was in jail at the time she filed for divorce. The court said I have done a change of address because I had moved since that time, but the court sent the notice not to me in jail, which is what they should have done, but to a residence I no longer lived at. I went to court. I proved, look, I showed that I changed the address. You sent it to the wrong address. And second, I was in jail, so you're really supposed to let me know while I'm in jail because you know exactly where I'm at. The judge initially said, no, you're still divorced. I then threatened that judge and said,
who's this judge? Can we get the name? Who's the judge?
Natalie Lough, Lough, first name, common spelling, Natalie. Initially, she said, no, you're still divorced anyway. And then I say, no, I'm going to tell on you. Now, I don't remember who I was going to tell on her with. But then after I said I was going to tell on her, she reversed her decision and says, okay, you can have a divorce and you can be present. So then immediately when she says that, I file for divorce again. Nothing happens. Then my wife files divorce and we get an actual date for the divorce. I turn in all my financials, all the paperwork that's required. I go to court. My wife has not done the same thing. The judge had prior told us both to do it. Go to court. I've already done it, but since the judge never opens any of the things I submit to the court, tells me, I'm going to fine you $1,500 if you don't do this. And I'm like, I already did it. At the same time, my wife had not filed it, so I say, I want her to give me the same things I've given the court, to which the judge tells me, well, you got to file something to make sure you got to file something to ask for that so I can make a ruling on whether or not she has to do that. So it's kind of rules for me and rules for thee.
Yes, I've seen that tactic quite a bit, basically forcing you to expend legal fees to get every little step
Well, I can't even
done.
expend legal fees because I can't afford an attorney being disabled. I do have a waiver from the court because my income is so low where I actually don't have to pay attorney's fees or pay fees for court filings. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank God for small miracles. At some point, I believe she took your medication.
Yeah. Well, when I left the home, I was so discombobulated, I left all the medication in my refrigerator. Now, to understand this medication, is it extremely expensive? These infusions cost Now, I don't know how real these numbers are because insurance companies always say, well, this is what it would have cost without insurance and this is what it is, but the insurance company never pays anything close to that.
Right.
On the bills I would get, it said without the insurance, this medication cost $80,000 a month. There was a 7-month supply I had saved up for anticipation of being separated and divorced. She threw out $560,000 worth of infusions. Yeah.
Was this reported to the court?
I don't think initially it was, but yeah, at some point it was.
Not that I would have
I
expected it to make a difference, but just as getting it on the record.
It was not reported at the very beginning when they told about the letters and gave them the copies of the written apology and all the other stuff. But yeah, later on they were made aware.
Okay. Al, you spent 400 plus days in jail?
Yeah, I spent just short of a year, about 350 days initially. And then after a year, they just had to let me out. They just, can't just keep someone forever, not giving them a trial. And then during the course of the trial, they kept me in jail while the trial was going on.
And you were in jail on the orders of Judge Lowe?
Well, no. Judge Lowe doesn't come into later. I went there as Gail O'Rain, the original judge, which is funny thing. Gail O'Rain, the family court judge, is actually the head of the Committee to Eliminate Bias and Promote Equal Justice. She is the head of the 32-member committee of that board. And that's why whenever I send anything over to them, they don't even acknowledge it exists. I've got no acknowledgement. I've sent them about a dozen letters so far. Not a single one has been acknowledged. I resorted to sending letters to the original committee members I could find, which was 7 of them. They never responded. And in the end, at this point, I found 30 addresses of the 32 judges who are on the committee. They've all received it, asked them all to intervene, and not a single one has responded.
And I think that's where we're going to pick up next time we talk. I think at least today we've got an idea about the marriage and sort of what happened in it and the beginning of the legal nightmare that is the real story here. And we're going to get into that next time. William, I really appreciate you sitting down to tell this story. I think it's one that needs to get out. And I'll look forward to, in a few days, we're going to sit down again and finish this out.
We have to do it on a Saturday or Sunday because I am destroyed on when I protest. It's too high, my physical pain.
Okay, so Saturday, a week from now, will that work for you at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Again, thank you so much for this. Terribly sorry to hear everything you've been going through. I wish it were an uncommon story. Unfortunately, it is not. It is the standard. I've been talking to guys for 40 years about their divorces, and this has been the dominating story all the way through. No justice for men whatsoever, no justice for fathers.
There's one thing people could do for me that would really help me, and it's very, very minimal. I am trying to garner enough support where the local press starts taking this on. So I've made an X account. It's called Dem War on Men, DEM for Democrat, Dem War on Men. And if people who watch this video could please follow me there, if I can get that follower count up, I've only had this for about a week, this account, maybe the local press will see that there's some interest in this story, and maybe I can push this forward. So that's the best and easiest thing someone could do to help me.
We will have the link to William's X account in the description area for this video on YouTube and on my Substack. And we'll also put it there again when we finish up this discussion. William Seremak, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate this. I can't tell you how much this means to me.
Great.